Welcome back to the deep dive. Look, we're cutting through the noise today. We want to get you some immediate, high-impact knowledge straight from your source material. We're really focused entirely on action here because, well, if you've got a high-stakes interview coming up, you just don't have time for theory, right?
That's absolutely right. Our mission today is taking that foundational roadmap from English for Job Interview Mastery, specifically Episode 7. And we're going to distill it into a clear, actionable guide for you. This material really promises that critical edge you might need.
Yeah, exactly. And our goal for you, the listener, isn't just, summarizing. We want to provide the actual tools that are contained within these sources. We really want you to walk away with a clear understanding of those essential skills, the professional vocabulary needed, and just that overall confidence to succeed in basically any job interview setting.
And the promise here is pretty compelling. It's saying, look, it's not just enough to answer questions correctly. The real goal is to answer common, and particularly those tricky questions, in a way that genuinely impresses the interviewer. And doing it using what the material calls natural English. It's framed as a kind of shortcut to professional fluency.
Okay, let's unpack this right away. Let's start with the core requirements.
Yeah.
What is the source actually defining as mastery? I mean, beyond just basic language proficiency, what are the three non-negotiables?
Right. So the material defines success through three specific strategic outcomes. It's presented as a method designed to make you seem, well, fully competent and integrated. First, you absolutely must respond with confidence.
Okay, confidence, got it.
Second, you need to utilize a targeted professional vocabulary.
Professional vocabulary, right.
And third, you've got to rigorously avoid common mistakes. Those things that immediately flag you as maybe inexperienced or unprepared.
That's a powerful distinction, isn't it? Because, like you said, anyone can speak English. Maybe, but that specific blend confidence mixed with that professional precision that feels key. But let's get concrete for a second. When the source talks about professional vocabulary, what are we actually talking about? Can you give us a usable nugget right now, something people can, grab onto?
Yeah, definitely. We need to move away from, say, passive language. For instance, instead of just saying, oh, I helped solve the problem, professional vocabulary demands verbs that convey impact, leadership. Think about using words like you spearheaded an initiative.
Spearheaded. Oh.
Or you optimized a process, or maybe you mitigated a risk. That shift, you see, from just general verbs to these high-impact ones, it shows you think strategically about your role and, importantly, its outcomes.
That makes the distinction really crystal clear. It's not about confusing jargon. It's about actually communicating your value.
Okay, but now let me push back a bit on that third point. Avoiding common mistakes. Are we talking simple grammar errors here, or is it something deeper? Because, look, if you're trying to use all this high-level vocabulary, doesn't the risk of a simple slip-up actually go up?
That's a great question. And what's fascinating here, and this I think connects back to the broader context of the Echo Minds podcast mentioned in the source where culture meets language, is that many of these so-called common mistakes are actually cultural or structural faux pas. They're not just grammatical slip-ups.
Okay. Like what?
Well, for example, common mistake might be being overly humble or sort of passive when you describe your achievements. That doesn't always translate well in certain professional cultures, particularly where, self-advocacy is expected.
Right, I can see that. Another mistake is maybe failing to structure your answers clearly. That can come across as a lack of polish or even respect for the interviewer's time. So these mistakes often reveal a lack of cultural fluency, not just a gap in linguistic skill.
So mastery isn't just about the words you use, it's about strategically positioning yourself within that whole cultural and professional framework. Okay, that prepares us perfectly for the application side. This is where it gets really interesting. The source specifically breaks down how to master two distinct types of interview questions.
Precisely, and they start with that gateway question, the one pretty much everyone faces. Tell me about yourself.
Ah, the classic starter. It seems so simple, doesn't it? But like you said, it sets the entire tone. The source must be treating this as a kind of high-stakes rehearsal then? Why does it require mastery?
Well, it demands mastery, because it's really your first big chance to deploy that professional narrative we talked about. And to demonstrate that natural English, the material promises. Now, natural English here doesn't mean like super informal or slangy. It means fluent, idiomatic, and really critically, not sounding overly rehearsed.
Right, not robotic.
Exactly. You need to sound polished, sure, but also conversational. This question is basically a structured elevator pitch, but delivered with the confidence and the professional vocabulary we just discussed. It sets up a theme, a narrative, that the interviewer can hopefully follow for the next, 45 minutes or so.
Yeah, if you stumble here, you've kind of already burned through your confidence points before you even hit the really tough stuff. And the tough stuff naturally is that second category the source calls out, the tricky behavioral question.
This is the complexity trap. Behavioral questions, they're specifically designed to test your past performance as a way to predict your future fit. These are those classic, tell me about a time when you failed, or describe a difficult client interaction type questions.
Yeah, the ones everyone dreads a little bit.
Exactly. And the sources really imply that if you try to just wing these, you are almost guaranteed to commit those common mistakes we mentioned.
Yeah.
Being unstructured, rambling on, or maybe failing to actually highlight your results properly.
Okay, so since the source promises a methodology to navigate these complexity traps successfully, we need to talk structure. The technical solution, if you like, for these behavioral questions seems crucial. What specific methodology is implied when they focus on strategic responses?
Right. The underlying methodology that's almost certainly needed to handle these tricky behavioral questions effectively is the STAR method. STAR. Situation, task, action, result. It's pretty well known, but the key is applying it well. This is the structural backbone that really forces strategic communication. You're essentially taught how to, first, set the scene clearly, that's the situation and task. Then, detail your specific contributions using that high-impact professional vocabulary that's the action. And then, most importantly perhaps, quantify and emphasize the outcome, the result, what actually happened because of your action.
Okay, I see how that works. The structure of STAR itself almost forces you away from just passive descriptions and directly into demonstrating competence, right? If you're forced to define the action you took, you almost have to use verbs like spearheaded or optimized. It sounds like a mechanism for actually deploying that professional vocabulary we want.
Exactly right. The structure itself kind of insists on strategic word choice. It guides you there. Without a framework like STAR, people often get bogged down detailing the situation and maybe the task, just burning precious time. And they risk losing the interviewer's focus before they ever get to the really impactful results. So the mastery here is that learned ability to apply the STAR structure almost flawlessly, even under pressure.
Okay, but here's a potential issue. Won't using such a, seemingly rigid structure like STAR make the answer sound a bit canned, a bit robotic? I mean, if everyone preparing for an interview is using this method, how do you maintain that promise of natural English? How do you stand out?
That is the critical tension, absolutely. And that's where the mastery of confidence and that cultural fluency really comes back in. Yes, the structure ensures clarity and covers the key points, but it's the delivery that makes it natural.
The delivery.
Yeah, the confidence in your voice, the varied sentence structures you use within the framework, the specific, vivid vocabulary choices you make. That's what makes it sound like your experience, rather than you just reading a script. The goal isn't to just recite STAR points, it's to internalize the framework so deeply that you can fill it with genuinely idiomatic, energetic language. You're personalizing the structure, not just repeating it. This way, the interviewer hears your professional story, your impact, not just some generic template.
Okay, that really is a fundamental reframing of how to prepare, isn't it? So we've identified the problems, those tricky questions, the potential for cultural mistakes, and the solutions: building confidence, using specific professional vocabulary, and applying structures like STAR effectively. The source promises the listener will master the skills you need to succeed.
Exactly. And this connects the immediate, very practical goal, nailing the job interview, to that broader educational philosophy we can infer from the source material. We know the Echo Minds podcast covers English learning, culture, and inspiring conversations. So this interview mastery episode, it looks like it's just the most high-stakes, maybe most immediate application of blending language and cultural fluency.
Right. So the value really extends far beyond just getting through one job application. This sounds like a fast track to understanding professional integration more broadly.
Precisely. The relevance for you, the listener, is that mastering these interview-specific skills acts as a massive shortcut. It really accelerates your understanding of that intersection between professional norms, cultural expectations, and the language you use. By learning how to talk about your results using those strategic verbs within a formal structure like STAR, you're essentially absorbing the core professional lexicon and the cultural expectations of that environment much, much faster than you might through just general language learning alone.
Yeah, it's the difference between just learning the language and learning how to actually wield it powerfully in a specific professional context. That feels like the true deep dive takeaway here. Okay, quick recap then of our core findings. Mastering interview success requires a conscious focus on boosting confidence, utilizing specific professional vocabulary, think spearhead, optimize, mitigate, and crucially, avoiding those common errors, which, as we've discussed, are often cultural missteps, especially when you're tackling the classic tell me about yourself and those higher stakes, tricky behavioral questions using a reliable structure, like the STAR method.
Right. And since the ultimate goal here is clearly stated as mastering skills, avoiding mistakes, and impressing interviewers by successfully blending that professional culture and strategic language, it does raise an important final thought for you, the listener. If the STAR method provides the universal how for answering these questions structurally, what specific cultural nuances do you think are actually hidden within the results section of those behavioral questions? What is an interviewer truly trying to uncover about your cultural fit when they listen to the outcomes you present? Are they looking for signs of modesty, or clear ownership, or perhaps quantified, even aggressive success? Something to think about.
That's a great question to leave folks with. Keep exploring those high stakes intersections of culture and language, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.